There's a specific kind of silence that falls over a room when a family is about to be torn apart by greed. It's not a peaceful silence. It's the silence of a predator waiting to pounce. I sat on the floral sofa in the living room where I had spent the last 3 years of my life. I knew every stain on the carpet. I knew which floorboards creaked. I knew these things because I was the one who cleaned the carpets. I was the one who fixed the floorboards. I was the one who carried my grandmother from the sofa to her bed when she became too weak to walk. Across from me sat my brother, Stephen. He didn't know about the floorboards. He hadn't visited enough to notice. But today, he looked comfortable. He was leaning back, swirling a glass of scotch, Grandma's expensive scotch, with a look of smug expectation on his face. Next to him were my parents. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at a document on the coffee table. "Mark," my father said, finally breaking the silence. He used his business voice, the tone he used when he was trying to sell a used car. "We've reviewed Grandma's files. We found her last will and testament." He didn't hand it to me. He just tapped it with his finger. "It's dated 12 years ago," my mother added quickly. Before her mind started to slip. "And?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. "She left the house to Stephen," my father said. He said it casually, as if he were commenting on the weather, and the savings account, and the portfolio. I looked at Stephen. He grinned, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Cheers, little brother." "And what about me?" I asked. My mother reached under the table and pulled out a cardboard shoebox. She slid it across the coffee table. It scraped against the wood. "She wanted you to have her mementos," my mother said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Her knitting needles, her ceramic figurines, the sentimental things. She knew you were emotional." "Mark," my father cut in, seeing the look on my face. "Be reasonable. You have a pension. You have a steady job. Stephen has had some bad luck. He needs his house. Grandma would have wanted him to be secure. It's about equity." It was a lie. A toxic, radioactive lie. They weren't just stealing my inheritance. They were rewriting history. They thought I would yell. They thought I would cry. Instead, I took the shoebox. I stood up. I looked at the three of them, the vultures picking the meat off the bones of the woman I loved. "Okay," I said. I walked out the door. I didn't tell them that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. I didn't tell them that Grandma had warned me about this exact moment. They thought the game was over. They didn't know I was holding the rule book. To understand the betrayal, you have to understand the players. My grandmother, Eleanor, was a force of nature. She was sharp, witty, and possessed a moral compass made of iron. But in her final years, cancer came for her. It was a slow, brutal decline. When she got sick, I moved in. I was 34, single, and working remotely. It wasn't a burden. It was an honor. We spent nights drinking tea and watching old black and white movies. I was there for the chemo. I was there for the doctors. I was there when she was scared in the middle of the night. And then there was Stephen. Stephen was 42, and he was a disaster. He was the golden child, the firstborn who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. He had started 3 businesses. All 3 failed. He had been married twice. Both ended because of his gambling. Every time he fell, our parents were there with a safety net woven out of cash. They enabled him. They crippled him with kindness. During the 3 years I cared for Grandma, Stephen visited exactly twice. Both times, he asked her for a loan. Both times, she said no. Grandma wasn't senile. That was the narrative my parents were trying to spin now, that she was confused in her final years, so any recent decisions she made were invalid. They wanted to revert to a will from 12 years ago, back when Stephen was still the promising young man, before the gambling, before the ruin. My parents were executors of the estate. They had the keys. They had the paperwork. They thought they had total control. But Grandma Eleanor was smarter than them. She knew her son, my father, was weak. She knew he would cave to Stephen's demands. So, she made a contingency plan. I drove back to my small apartment, the shoebox of mementos on the passenger seat. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Stephen. "Don't be sore, Mark. I'm thinking of putting a hot tub. You can come use it sometime if you call first. I didn't reply. I carried the box inside and dumped it onto my kitchen table. Ceramic cats, a half-finished scarf, old reading glasses, and at the bottom, heavy and leather-bound, her old family Bible. I sat down and ran my hand over the cover. I remembered a night about 6 months ago. The pain medication was making Grandma drowsy, but her eyes were clear. She had grabbed my wrist with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "They are vultures, Mark," she had whispered. "Your father is a good man, but he is weak, and your mother is blind when it comes to Stephen. Don't worry about them, Grandma," I'd said. "I have to worry," she insisted. "When I go, they will try to take it. They will try to give it to him to pay off his debts. I won't let him drink my legacy away." She pulled me closer. "Read the good book, Mark. When the time comes, read Psalm 23. But read in the old book, the one in the attic." I opened the Bible now. The pages were thin, like onion skin. I turned to the Old Testament. I found the Psalms. Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." There was something taped between the pages. It wasn't a will. It was a small, yellow slip of paper. A receipt. First National Bank. Safe deposit box number 402. And taped right next to it was a small, flat silver key. My parents didn't know about this bank. They banked at Chase. Grandma had opened this box secretly, taking a taxi across town while I was at the grocery store, specifically to keep it off their radar. I looked at the date on the receipt. 6 months ago. I closed the Bible. I didn't cry. A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. This wasn't just about money. This was about honoring her final wish. This was about stopping the vultures. The next morning, at 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into First National Bank. The bank manager, a woman named Mrs. Higgins, recognized the key immediately. "Ah, Eleanor's grandson. She told me you'd be coming. She said, if anyone else comes asking, tell them you've never heard of me." She led me into the vault. It was cool and smelled of steel. She unlocked box number 402. Inside, there was a thick manila envelope and a USB drive. I opened the envelope. It was a last will and testament. But this one wasn't 12 years old. It was dated 6 months ago. It was notarized. It was witnessed by Mrs. Higgins and another bank teller. I scanned the document. Article 1, Revocation. I hereby revoke all former wills and codicils. Article 3, Distribution. I leave my entire estate, including the property of 42, Oak Lane, my savings, and my personal effects, to my grandson Mark. He was the only one who cared for me not out of obligation, but out of love. And then the kicker. Article 4. I intentionally leave nothing to my grandson Stephen, nor to my son Robert. They have received their inheritance in the form of bailouts and loans during my lifetime, totaling in excess of $200,000. They are to receive nothing. It was brutal. It was clear. It was perfect. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop, right there, in the bank's conference room. A video file popped up. It was Grandma. She was sitting in this very room, holding today's newspaper to prove the date. She looked directly into the camera. "Hello, Robert." "Hello, Stephen," she said on the screen. Her voice was steady. "If you're watching this, it means you try to bypass my wishes. I am of sound mind. I am not confused. I am giving everything to Mark because he deserves it. Stephen, you would only squander it. This is my final word." I sat back. I had the smoking gun, but I didn't want to just win. I wanted to make sure they couldn't wiggle out of it. I needed legal armor. I called the fiercest probate attorney in the city, a man named Mr. Vance. I showed him everything. Vance smiled a shark-like smile. "This is bulletproof, Mark. But if we serve them now, they'll just scream and drag it out. We should let them commit." "Commit?" I asked. "Let them spend money they don't have," Vance said. "Let them dig the hole. When they are waist-deep in renovations on a house they don't own, that's when we bury them." I went home and did the hardest thing I've ever done. I sent a text to my father. "I've been thinking. You're right. It's not worth tearing the family apart. I won't contest the will. Good luck with the house." I baited the trap, and they took it hook, line, and sinker. The relief on their end was palpable. My mother sent me a long text with heart emojis, telling me I was a good son for stepping aside. Then, the madness began. Because Stephen had terrible credit and no income, he couldn't get a loan to start the renovations he wanted. He wanted to turn Grandma's beautiful Victorian kitchen into a modern, open-concept monstrosity. He wanted a man cave in the basement. So my parents stepped up. They were so confident that the house was now Stephen's asset, an asset worth $1.5 million, that they leveraged their own financial future. They took out a home equity line of credit, HELOC, on their own house. They borrowed $200,000. They handed the cash to Stephen. It's an investment, my father told his golf buddies. Stephen is going to flip the house, and we'll double our money. They didn't wait for probate to close. They didn't wait for the title transfer. They assumed that since I had surrendered, the legalities were just a formality. 2 weeks later, the dumpsters arrived at Grandma's house. I drove by one evening. I saw the demolition crew. I saw the pile of debris in the front yard, Grandma's cabinets, her antique moldings, the beautiful oak banister she loved. It made me physically sick to watch. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run in there and stop them. But Mr. Vance had been clear. Wait until the damage is irreversible. Wait until the money is spent. So I waited. I watched Stephen post on Facebook. Demo day. Out with the old, in with the new. Finally getting what I deserve. Hashtag renovation, hashtag blessed. He was spending money like water. High-end appliances. Imported marble. He wasn't fixing the house. He was erasing Grandma. My parents were beaming. They were over at the house every day, supervising. They were so proud of their son, the developer. They had spent about $80,000 of the borrowed money when I made the call. Mr. Vance, I said, drop the hammer. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The contractors were in the middle of tearing down a load-bearing wall to open up the kitchen. Dust was everywhere. I pulled up to the curb. Right behind me came a sheriff's deputy car. And behind that, Mr. Vance's black Mercedes. I stepped out. I was wearing a suit. I felt calm. My father was on the front porch, holding a set of blueprints. When he saw the police car, his smile dropped. "Mark," he called out. "Is everything okay? What's the cop doing here?" Stephen came out of the house, covered in drywall dust, wearing a respirator mask on his forehead. "What's going on?" "You here to help sand?" I walked up the driveway, flanked by the deputy and Mr. Vance. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the saws inside, "I'm here to inspect my property." "Your property?" Stephen laughed. "You hit your head, little brother. You gave up. Remember?" Mr. Vance stepped forward. He didn't smile. He handed a stack of documents to my father. "Mr. Sterling," Vance said, "this is a court order issued this morning by Judge Harrington. It validates the last will and testament of Eleanor Sterling, dated 6 months ago. It names Mark Sterling as the sole executor and beneficiary." My father looked at the paper. His hand started to shake. This is a mistake. We have a will. It's from 2012. That will has been revoked," Vance said. "The new will, and the video testimony accompanying it, supersedes everything. The judge has granted an immediate injunction. You are trespassing." "Video." My mother appeared in the doorway, pale as a ghost. "What video?" I pulled out my phone. I had the video ready. I pressed play and held it up. Grandma's voice rang out from the tiny speaker, clear and sharp. "I intentionally leave nothing to my grandson Stephen. They have received their inheritance in bailouts." Stephen stared at the screen. The color drained from his face. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing. She was crazy," Stephen stammered. "She didn't know what she was saying. She was senile. She looks pretty sharp to me," the deputy remarked, looking at the screen. "And the judge seems to agree." "But," my father looked at the house. He looked at the dumpster full of debris. "But, we've already spent $80,000. We gutted the kitchen. We ordered the marble. You gutted my kitchen," I corrected him. "You destroyed my property." "We can't stop now," my mother shrieked. "We took a loan. We're liable for the debt." "That sounds like a personal problem," I said. "Officer, I'd like these trespassers removed from my property, and I want the contractors to stop immediately." The scene that followed was pathetic. The deputy ordered the contractors to pack up. They were furious. They wanted to know who was paying them for the day's work. Stephen pointed to my father. My father pointed to the ground. Stephen tried to argue. He tried to puff his chest out. You can't do this to family, Mark. I have debts. The sharks are coming for me. You should have thought of that before you tried to steal from me, I said. You should have thought of that when you visited Grandma twice in 3 years, just to ask for money. Mark, please, my father begged. He grabbed my arm. We took a helic on our house. If Stephen doesn't get this house, we can't pay it back. We'll lose our home. You have to let us finish the flip. We'll split the profit. I looked at my father. I saw the fear in his eyes. But I also saw the man who had sat on that couch 3 weeks ago and told me I deserved nothing. You didn't want to split anything when you thought you had the winning hand, I said. Get off my property. The deputy escorted them to their cars. Stephen was crying, ugly, heaving sobs. My mother was screaming that I was an ungrateful son. My father just looked old. I stood on the porch and watched them drive away. Then, I turned and walked into the house. It was a mess. The walls were torn open. The floors were ripped up. But the bones of the house were still there. Grandma was still here. The aftermath was total financial carnage for them. The probate court moved fast. With the video evidence, the undue influence argument my parents tried to use fell apart instantly. The 2012 will was thrown out. The house was legally mine. But I wasn't done. I sued Stephen and my parents for the damage done to the property. Mr. Vance argued that the renovations were actually destruction of value. We sued for the cost to restore the Victorian woodwork and the original layout. Since Stephen had no money, the judgment fell on my parents. They were stuck with the $80,000 helic debt they had already spent, plus the cost of the contractors who sued them for breach of contract, plus the judgment from my lawsuit. They had to sell their own home, the house I grew up in, to cover the debts. They downsized into a 2-bedroom rental apartment. Stephen had to declare bankruptcy. Again, he lives on their couch now. It's a tight squeeze in that apartment. I imagine it's not very peaceful. As for me, I didn't sell Grandma's house. I used my savings and the inheritance cash to restore it. I brought in craftsmen to replicate the molding Stephen had destroyed. I rebuilt the kitchen exactly the way Grandma had it, but with new appliances hidden behind the vintage cabinet facings. I live here now. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, I sit in the sunroom where Grandma used to read. I drink tea. I look at the garden. My mother calls sometimes. She leaves voicemails crying, asking why I won't help them, asking how I can sleep at night, knowing my brother is sleeping on a love seat, and they are renting at 65 years old. I don't answer. I sleep just fine, because I know that somewhere, Grandma Eleanor is watching. She didn't leave me this house just to give me a place to live. She left me this house to teach them a lesson they refuse to learn on their own. You can't steal a legacy, and if you bet against the truth, you better be prepared to lose everything you put on the table. This is the Vindication Reporter, signing off.